Next, Mr. Chameleon and the Stingy Husband murder case. Tonight, we again present the famous Mr. Chameleon of Central Police Headquarters in his famous cases of crime and murder, brought to you by the makers of genuine Bayer aspirin. Mr. Chameleon, as you know, is the famous and dreaded detective who frequently uses a disguise to track down a killer, a disguise which at all times is recognized by the audience. Tonight, we give you Mr. Chameleon in the Stingy Husband murder case. The scene opens in the office of Angus McCreary, sales agent for a Scottish hosiery and knit goods firm, an office as austere and forbidding as Angus himself, whom we see poring over a set of figures, as he is interrupted by his wife Elise, who enters in a fury to speak the words that lead to strange and violent murder.
A pretty kettle of fish. When a man's wife enters his office and nearly shatters the glass in the door. But at that, you're exactly the person I want to see, Elise.
And don't think I don't want to see you, Angus. I've never been so embarrassed in my life.
You embarrassed? Isn't that something new for you?
I've just come from Jenkins' store.
Spending my money, no do.
I bought a box of handkerchiefs there. And when I started to take it with me, Mr. Jenkins himself stopped me at the door. He wouldn't let me take it out.
No?
He said I'd have to pay for it in cash or leave it. That you had stopped my charge account there. My charge account.
I've stopped your charge account everywhere, Elise.
What?
I'm a man, not a gold mine. Look at these bills I got here.
What about them?
$1,500 for a fur cape. $600 for 3 evening gowns. $100 for unmentionables.
A woman can't go naked, Angus. She has to have something to cover her.
And a bill for $500 for French champagne.
I've got to entertain our friends decently. What do you expect them to drink? Water?
It's good enough for them.
You cheap skinflint. Before I married you, you said I could have anything I wanted.
At the time, I didn't know you wanted the world. And I'm telling you now that you... Come in. Now hold yourself in, Elise. I think it's my secretary.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Mr. McCreary, but a call just came from the bank.
It hasn't failed, has it?
Mr. Milford at the bank asked me to tell you your account is overdrawn and that they can't honor any more of your checks.
What's that, Miss Atkins? My account overdrawn?
Mr. Milford said they would await cash for the amount of the overdraw, $1,153.45.
The man's mad. I've drawn no big checks lately.
One check was signed with your name, Mr. McCreary, per Elise McCreary.
That's all, Miss Atkins. Leave the room and close the door behind you.
Yes, Mr. McCreary.
Well, Elise, did you sign one of my checks that way?
Yes, for $2,000. And as your wife, I had that right.
You've got no rights to my money. And you keep your voice down.
I won't. If you'd given me my own bank account, this wouldn't have happened. Every wife has a right to her own bank account.
You're not a wife. You're a money-spending machine. I've had all I can swallow. I'm done with you.
What?
Get a divorce for me. Go out and find yourself a rich sucker to marry.
Where are you going, Angus?
I'm leaving the office. I don't want my employees to hear of family fate. Now goodbye.
You cheapskate. You stingy penny pincher. What's this? No. Don't. Take that gun away. Oh.
And a short time later, we find Mr. Chameleon, the great and dreaded detective, approaching the offices of Angus McCreary with Detective Dave Arnold. And he is saying...
Well, this is the place, Dave.
Yep. Angus McCreary, Scottish Knit Goods and Hosiery, it says on the door.
Let's go in, shall we?
You're the police?
I'm Mr. Chameleon, and this is Detective Arnold.
I'm Rose Atkins, Mr. McCreary's secretary. Mrs. McCreary's body is right in that office.
Where is Mr. McCreary? I want to see him.
He's not here, Mr. Chameleon.
Dave, you go in and look at the body, please.
Right on, Mr. Chameleon.
Whose office is it where the murder occurred?
Why, it's Mr. McCreary's office. But
When did Mr. McCreary leave it?
A few seconds before Mrs. McCreary was shot. He wasn't here when I heard the shot, so if you have any ideas about him...
I think that you'd do better giving me answers than opinions, Rose.
I'm sorry. I was only trying to tell you what happened. Mr. McCreary couldn't have killed his wife if he wasn't in the office.
That is the question. Who else was here beside you when the shots were fired?
Mr. McCreary wasn't.
Rose, let me ask you, why do you keep saying that he wasn't?
Well, he wasn't.
Well, then who was besides yourself?
Mr. Bodkin, Mr. McCreary's sales manager.
Well, then, in your opinion, Mr. Bodkin killed his employer's wife. Where can I find Mr. Bodkin?
You can find me right here, Mr. Chameleon. I'm Herbert Bodkin.
Oh, all right, Mr. Bodkin. From your precipitate entrance at just the right moment, I assume that you overheard what Rose has been telling me.
I certainly did. I have a right to protect myself, haven't I?
You seem to think that you need protection, Mr. Bodkin.
Give me a chance to talk, Mr. Chameleon. Rose is keeping the crucial facts of this murder from you.
How?
She's neglecting to tell you that before Elise McCreary was killed, Elise and her husband Angus were having a row that almost shook the office down.
How dreadful of you to say that, Mr. Bodkin.
Well, I'm not as anxious to keep my job here as you are, Rose.
I don't know what you're talking about, Herbert Bodkin.
I heard you giving Mr. Chameleon the idea that I killed Elise. Nice way to get in right with the boss.
Who found the body?
Why, I did, Mr. Chameleon.
Well.
But listen to me. Just as I stepped into Angus McCreary's office and found Elise dead, I heard Angus himself running down the stairs in the hall.
What?
That's it. The moment I heard the shots, I ran to the office. I was afraid Elise had killed Angus the way they were battling.
So you heard the shots, Mr. Bodkin. Ran into the murder room from your office, found the body...
And came back to call me. And I phoned for the police, Mr. Chameleon.
What's that got to do with it, Rose?
Perhaps more than you think, Mr. Bodkin. You were very near the scene at the time of the murder.
Can't I make you understand that I heard Angus running away?
Were you...
Mr. Chameleon?
Yes, Dave. Did you find anything?
Seems the murderer was kind of careless, Mr. Chameleon. Here's the murder gun.
Ah, that's a break. Rose, Herbert Bodkin, can either of you identify this gun?
Why, I...
It's Angus McCreary's gun, Mr. Chameleon. Rose knows that as well as I do.
Do you, Rose?
I'm not sure.
Dave, put out a general alarm to bring in Angus McCreary, please.
Mr. Chameleon, I suggest that Detective Arnold look for Angus in Corbett's bar down the street. He's probably putting a few down to steady himself after what happened.
Okay. Dave, see if you can find him now.
Okay, if he isn't, I'll send out the alarm, Mr. Chameleon.
All right. Rose, did you overhear the quarrel between Angus McCreary and his murdered wife?
Yes, Mr. Chameleon. It was about money. Mrs. McCreary was a very extravagant woman.
She means Angus is a tightwad.
No more so than most Scotsmen, Mr. Chameleon. Mrs. McCreary had run up a lot of big bills.
And Angus was making a row over it?
Yes, he had stopped her charge accounts, and she was very angry. And right in the middle of it...
Yes?
Mr. Milford phoned from the bank to say Mr. McCreary's account was overdrawn. You see...
Yes?
Well, to make it worse, he said Mrs. McCreary had signed a check herself on Mr. McCreary's account for $2,000.
That accounts for it all, Mr. Chameleon. That was more than Angus could take. He killed Elise in a rage. He's violent about money.
I'm wondering, Bodkin, why you're so extraordinarily interested in pinning this murder on Angus McCreary.
What?
Perhaps I can tell you, Mr. Chameleon.
Mr. Chameleon? Here's Mr. Angus McCreary. He was at Corbett's bar, all right.
And may I ask what you want of me, Mr. Chameleon?
Information about your wife's murder, Mr. McCreary.
I'm a man who's saving of words, and whatever talking I do will be in private. You step into my office.
Your wife's body is still there, Mr. McCreary.
Very well, then. We'll use Bodkin's office. And Miss Rose,
Yes, Mr. McCreary.
get through on the phone to Corbett's bar.
To Corbett's bar?
That's what I said, Corbett's bar. Tell them I put a $5 bill on the bar in payment for 2 drinks, and when I left with Detective Arnold, I didn't pick up the change. Send on for it.
Yes, Mr. McCreary.
Just a minute here.
Yeah? What?
You seem to be more interested in the change from a $5 bill than your wife's murder.
I'll mind my affairs, Mr. Chameleon, and you mind yours.
That is not so easy, Mr. McCreary. My business is murder.
Am I contesting that?
I understand that within, let's say, 10 seconds of the time that your wife was shot, you were violently quarreling with her About money.
And who said that?
Miss Rose, your secretary, said it.
The wagging tongue of a woman means nothing.
But I didn't mean anything by it, Mr. McCreary.
Keep your lips tight and you'll get into no trouble.
And Herbert Bodkin here says that this gun, the gun used to kill your wife, is yours.
Then no doubt he took it out of my desk and used it himself to kill her.
He's a liar, Mr. Chameleon.
Herbert was in love with my wife, Mr. Chameleon.
He's a liar, I tell you.
He introduced me to my wife originally, Mr. Chameleon. There's no doubt the two of them were bleeding me.
So it might be fair to say that you had two motives for killing your wife, money and jealousy.
What?
Two motives, Mr. McCreary, money and jealousy.
Oh, you're a canny lad, aren't you? But use your gift properly. Use it properly. Herbert Bodkin killed her. You've heard of frustrated love, have you not?
Watch him, Mr. Chameleon. He's smarter than you are.
That's what I'm about to find out, Bodkin. Mr. McCreary, you come in here. Let's have that private talk that you suggested. There's one thing about this case that I can't understand, Mr. McCreary.
And that is...
Your total unconcern over your wife's murder.
Have you ever been married to a woman, Mr. Chameleon, who spent every waking hour blowing your money?
So far, I haven't acquired a wife, but...
It's much to be thankful for, you have.
Let's get back to the subject of the murder, Mr. McCreary.
Well, you're the one who's been straying from it.
And then we'll get back on it fast. You admit that the murder gun is yours.
I do.
You admit that you had a violent quarrel with your wife just before her murder.
She'd overdrawn my bank account.
And you admit that immediately after the murder, you ran out of the building.
I do not. I left before the murder.
Can you prove that?
Can you prove I didn't, Mr. Chameleon?
Believe me, when I do, you'll go in for murder.
And my suggestion, then, is to get a feather in your cap by proving it.
You said that your sales manager, Herbert Bodkin, was in love with your wife. Now, love is no reason for killing her.
It is, my lad, if she tossed him out.
Did Cham?
Well, she wasn't in the habit of confiding her love affairs in me, Mr. Chameleon. Not while she could bleed my veins for money.
Why is your secretary, Rose Atkins, so set on establishing that you were out of the building at the murder time?
What's your idea on that?
I'm asking the question, McCreary.
No, dude, because she hopes to get money out of me, too, but she won't. Not a farthing.
I wonder if you understand your whole attitude is making you look very, very bad. Guilty, in fact.
Under the law, that's your business to prove, Mr. Chameleon.
You needn't explain the law to me, McCreary.
Your hand, holding your hand so close to your face, Chameleon, you can't see the forest for the trees.
Where do you keep the banking account you say that your wife overdrew?
That is my private affair.
Well, I'll make it mine. What is the bank's name? If you don't tell me, I'll rip this place apart and find your checkbooks.
The Scottish American Bank.
Thank you.
Mr. Chameleon.
Yes, Dave.
Here's something. On the off chance, I phoned that Mr. Milford at the bank, and there's something darn funny going on.
Funny?
Yes, sir. Milford says he never phoned here that Mr. McCreary's account was overdrawn.
What?
Furthermore, he says McCreary's now got a balance of over $100,000.
What do you make of this, Mr. Angus McCreary?
I make it that I've got a full 100,000 in the clear. That's all that interests me.
Another thing, Mr. Chameleon. That guy Herbert Bodkin tried to stop me from calling Mr. Milford.
Herbert Bodkin tried to stop you.
I had to slap him over to get to the phone.
Uh-huh. I wonder what that means.
I'm an older man than you, Mr. Chameleon, and I've seen more of life.
What are you leading to, McCreary?
It's as plain as the nose on your face, Mr. Chameleon. That telephone call was bogus. Bodkin must have put it through, thinking that it would make me lose my head and kill my wife, Elise. The laddie knows I got a temper.
You're entitled to any opinions that you may have, Mr. McCreary, and also entitled to try to lead the police off your trail.
I'm only trying to clear the cobwebs from your mind, Mr. Chameleon.
Well, don't waste your energy, McCreary. Detective Arnold and I will see Milford and get to the bottom of this.
I'll say we will.
Dave, hand me that phone, please. Hello, operator. Police business. Give me Central Police Headquarters. Commissioner of Police. This is Mr. Chameleon calling.
Hello, Chameleon. This is the commissioner. What's up?
Send a police auditor here to Angus McCreary's office. Have every transaction for the last year sifted.
All right, I'll start one out right away. Is that all?
Yes, that's all, Commissioner. If anything new develops meanwhile, you can get me at the Scottish American Bank. Dave Arnold and I will be there in a few minutes with a man named Milford. Goodbye. Come along, Dave.
Is it proper to ask why you're starting to dig into my private affairs, Mr. Chameleon?
Oh, yes, quite proper, Mr. McCreary. But I'm afraid it won't draw an answer from me. Goodbye.
Mr. Chameleon and the Stingy Husband murder case continues in just a moment. The very first thing to do when you feel a cold coming on is to take genuine Bayer aspirin. You should do this and do it before you do anything else, because a cold is almost always accompanied by muscular aches and pains and a headachy, feverish feeling. And it's important that you relieve this distress in the fastest possible way. Ask your own doctor about this. No matter what you do to try to stop or shorten a cold, we think he'll tell you it's sound advice. And as millions know who have followed this advice, Bayer aspirin provides the relief you want, makes you feel better fast. It's actually ready to go to work in 2 seconds. And remember, Bayer aspirin's single active ingredient is so gentle to the system that doctors regularly prescribe it even for small children. That's why it's been used by millions of normal people without ill effect. So at the first sign of a cold, before you do anything else, take Bayer aspirin. When you buy, ask for Bayer aspirin, not just for aspirin alone. Get the 100-tablet bottle and you get Bayer aspirin tablets for less than a penny apiece. And now back to Mr. Chameleon and the Stingy Husband murder case. Mr. Chameleon is investigating the murder of Elise McCreary, who was shot to death in her husband, Angus McCreary's office. Mr. Chameleon has learned that they had quarreled violently when a phone message came from McCreary's bank saying that his wife had overdrawn his account with a check for $2,000. But the bank clerk, a Mr. Milford, has denied making the phone call. Now, Mr. Chameleon, accompanied by Detective Dave Arnold, is at the bank, questioning Mr. Milford.
And you are certain, Mr. Milford, that you did not phone Angus McCreary's office and say his bank account was overdrawn?
Well, not only certain I didn't, Mr. Chameleon, but also certain nobody here at the bank did.
I see.
I checked up immediately after Detective Arnold phoned. It's very puzzling.
I understand that the murdered woman, Elise McCreary, drew a check for $2,000 on her husband's account a few days ago.
Yesterday, Mr. Chameleon.
May I see that check, Mr. Milford?
Certainly. I'll get it for you.
Thank you. Dave, quick. Give me that letter over there. See, it's got Elise McCreary at the top. It's her stationery. Copy this, Dave, as I read it, please.
Okay, Mr. Chameleon.
Dear Alfred, that's Milford's first name.
Uh-huh.
I'll meet you at the usual place tonight and bring the money. Signed, Elise.
Signed Elise. Hey, that's something.
Quick, Dave. Put it back. Here's Milford coming.
Here's the check, Mr. Chameleon, signed Angus McCreary per Elise McCreary. It's a bit irregular, but knowing Mr. and Mrs. McCreary so well, I cashed it.
I see. Mr. Milford, what is your exact position in this bank?
Why, I am an assistant teller.
Well, cashing an improperly signed check, then, is really a bit above your authority, isn't it?
Oh, not in this case, Mr. Chameleon, not at all.
Did you ever see, or rather, meet the murdered woman outside of your place of business?
Only to discuss investments, Mr. Chameleon. No other reason. Mr. Herbert Bodkin, Mr. McCreary's sales manager, will verify that.
Bodkin will verify.
Yes, Bodkin. Unfortunate thing. Unfortunate for Angus McCreary, I should say.
What? Unfortunate?
Unfortunate that Angus' wife and Bodkin should be having an affair. Oh, but I think I broke that up.
How?
By threatening to tell Angus. I didn't like to do it, but I thought it my duty. Bodkin threatened to kill me for it, but I don't think he really meant it. Just an angry flash. But with Elise, it was different. She was terrorized of Bodkin. Oh, but I'm talking too much.
This is a murder investigation, Mr. Milford. Holding anything back may put you under suspicion.
Me?
Yes, you, Milford.
But Herbert Bodkin is the one Elise McCreary was afraid of. He's the one who killed her. He or her husband, Angus. Both were capable of murder.
You're not a very good liar, Milford, and you are lying to me. Now tell me, where were you when the call came into McCreary's office that his wife had overdrawn his account?
I was at Billings' lunch counter getting my lunch.
You could have phoned from there, hoping McCreary would blow his top and kill his wife.
I didn't want Elise killed.
There's a blackmail note from her on your desk.
And furthermore, I've got a copy of it, Milford. You better come through.
All right. She was blackmailing me, she was, but I didn't murder her. I was at lunch when she was killed.
That breaks it wide open, Mr. Chameleon. Angus McCreary's secretary, Rose Atkins, told me she'd made a slip of the tongue when she said this guy Milford had called up about the bank balance. She said he came into the office and delivered the message in person.
Oh, that's a mistake. I didn't, Detective Arnold.
Why did you murder Elise McCreary, Milford?
I didn't.
On what count was she blackmailing you? Now tell me that.
Well, it started when Herbert Bodkin told me Elise was sweet on me, Mr. Chameleon, and like a fool, I believed him.
Yes, go on.
Elise flattered me, said I was the only man in her life. I started going places with her, and then one day she turned on me.
How?
Well, she said she'd go to the president of the bank and complain I was annoying her, the wife of a good customer. And that would have ended my career. You can see that.
I can also see a motive for murder, Milford. Go on.
So I had to cash Elise's phony checks on her husband's account, and I falsified the books. She forced me to give her over $50,000 out of Angus' bank account that way.
If that's the truth, Milford, you'll go to prison for embezzlement. If it's not, you'll go on trial for murder.
I didn't murder Elise. Herbert Bodkin or Angus, her husband, did.
Plant a couple of the boys to keep an eye on him, Dave.
Okay, Mr. Chameleon.
That's all now, Milford. Just don't try any tricks. Goodbye.
Well, what's your analysis, Mr. Chameleon?
Oh, it's anybody's guess, Dave. The eternal triangle. Stingy, violent, and extremely cagey husband. The sales manager who was undoubtedly working with the boss's wife to steal from his bank account.
And the bank teller, Milford, who the murdered woman was blackmailing.
Yes, the case rests on Milford's alibi. If he was at Angus McCreary's office at the murder time, he could have easily slipped in and killed Elise.
But how did he get hold of the gun? Angus's gun did the job.
No. Maybe Angus threatened her with the gun and left it out, Dave. Or somebody could have given it to Milford. Remember, Herbert Bodkin had the button on him, too, Dave. Or her husband, Angus himself, could be the murderer.
Well, what do we do now?
Well, you go back and check with the secretary, Rose Atkins, on whether Milford was really at Angus McCreary's office near the murder time. And then meet me at headquarters. I'm going to get into disguise.
Okay, I'll hustle out to see Rose. But what's the disguise, Mr. Chameleon?
I'm going to be Ike Hoggins, a counterman at the restaurant where Milford claims that he was at lunch when the murder was committed. I think that we'll come out with the murderer.
And an hour later, we find Mr. Chameleon in his disguise as Ike Hoggins, counterman at the restaurant where Alfred Milford claimed he was at lunch when Elise McCreary was murdered. We see Mr. Chameleon about to enter Angus McCreary's offices, and he is saying,
Dave, so Rose Atkins is positive that Milford was at this office within a few minutes of the murder?
Positively, Mr. Chameleon. And Rose remembered she didn't hear the elevator stop to take him down.
Good, Dave. From now on, I'm Ike Hoggins, and you know what to say. Let's go in.
Mr. Chameleon sent me with this man, folks, to identify the killer of Elise McCreary.
I've never seen this man before. Who is he?
Hi, Scotty. You remember me, Ike Hoggins by name.
You'll be leaving or I'll be kicking you out.
Don't try it, Scotty. Oh, you here too, Mr. Milford? Hiya, boy.
Well, what do you want with me?
Ike is here to check the time you were at the lunch counter, Mr. Milford. Well, Ike, what's the answer?
Mr. Milford was there at 2 o'clock on the dot, Detective Arnold. About an hour after the lady Elise McCreary got bumped off.
That's a lie. I was there at exactly 1 o'clock.
Why, you dirty dog, Milford, so you killed Elise.
Who's this ape, Detective Arnold?
He's Herbert Bodkin, the murdered woman's boyfriend, Ike.
Oh, the guy you say was hooked up with her and blackmailing Milford? Looks like you and your pal, Mr. Chameleon, has got 'em both, Detective Arnold.
You sneaking rascals, Bodkin and you, Milford. I'll tear you both apart. Mr. Chameleon phoned me that you and my wife were milking my bank account.
What do you think, Detective Arnold? This character is worrying more about losing a few dollars than about his wife's murder.
The three of them got away with 50,000 of my hard-earned money.
Pipe down, McCreary. Mr. Chameleon sent me here to check up on Mr. Milford's alibi. And Ike, old-timer, you fixed it up.
Glad I helped.
Miss Rose is ready to testify Milford was here at the murder time. Come along, Milford. I'm arresting you.
How terrible of you, Mr. Milford, to have killed Elise McCreary.
You're lying, Rose. You're lying to save Herbert Botkin. I wasn't here.
That's right, Mr. Milford. You weren't.
It's Mr. Chameleon. In disguise. Not the counterman Ike Hoggins.
Grab Rose Atkins, Dave.
All right, stop that now. I've got her, Mr. Chameleon.
Leave me alone. Let me alone. Let me alone.
You told a straight story, Rose, with one little exception. I believed you until you changed your story about Mr. Milford. We checked his alibi at the lunch counter, and he was there.
Why should I kill this old miser's wife?
I don't know. But the fingerprints on the murder gun were yours, so the game is up. I wonder, why did you kill her?
Because this tightwad Angus promised to divorce his wife and marry me. But he kept putting it off, so I decided to get rid of her myself.
Rose Atkins is as scheming as the other one was, Mr. Chameleon. She wanted me to buy her diamonds, and I'm no man for that. Diamonds, Mr. Chameleon. Diamonds! What I wanted was a working wife, a good cook and a housekeeper. I wasn't jumping from the frying pan into the fire by marrying Rose.
You old skinflint.
I rather think Angus is, Rose. But there's a law against murdering a man's wife, whether he's a miser or a spendthrift. All right, Dave, that's all. The case of the stingy husband is over.
And with these words, Mr. Chameleon concludes tonight's murder case. Mothers everywhere, listen carefully. Now, genuine Bayer aspirin is available in a new children's size tablet containing half the amount of the regular size Bayer aspirin tablet. These new children's size Bayer aspirin tablets make it possible for you to conveniently give your children the proper dosage as prescribed by your doctor. To do this, all you need use is one children's size Bayer aspirin tablet, because each tablet is full dosage. In addition, these new children's size Bayer aspirin tablets have another feature that appeals to wise mothers. They are neither flavored nor colored, so that they cannot be mistaken for candy, and they can be used with complete confidence. For the fact that doctors prescribe Bayer aspirin's single active ingredient even for the smallest children shows how gentle and dependable it is. The bottle and carton are plainly marked children's size Bayer aspirin, 30 tablets for 25 cents. Listen next Wednesday night at this same time for Mr. Chameleon, the man of many faces, in The Wife for Sale Murder Case. The part of Mr. Chameleon is played by Carl Swenson, with dialogue by Frank Hummert from the original story by Frank and Ann Hummert. Music directed by Victor Arden. Your announcer is Howard Claney.
Teeth that are really clean, free of decay breeding deposits and film, actually resist decay. That's why the only sensible way to help prevent tooth decay is to keep your teeth thoroughly clean at all times. And there's no dentifrice you can get that cleans teeth like powder. It's the best way that you can get your teeth really clean. Famous Dr. Lyon's tooth powder almost instantly helps remove the deposits and film that are breeding places for bacteria that cause tooth decay. So, to help prevent decay before it gets started, to whiten and brighten your teeth beautifully, use either regular or ammoniated Dr. Lyon's tooth powder.
Listen for Mr. Chameleon in The Wife for Sale Murder Case next Wednesday night at this time. This is CBS, the Columbia Broadcasting System.